Hello, and welcome to Conversations with the Reverend G. Happy New Year. Happy 2022. And I'm here today. I'm here a little late, but I'm excited to be here with you today to share with you things that I've learned over time and to share with you ways that I can support you in living your best life. I am Reverend G, a Grenetta Mason, and I'm here every Monday night from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on WEMS Radio, bringing you spiritual conversations. My guests, they come from all walks of life, and we talk about love, we talk about life, and we talk about spirituality. We talk about spirituality from a practical point of view, how it can support you in your everyday life, what's in your spiritual toolkit, and what spiritual practices you use to support you throughout your day, no matter what you're going through. I know it's 2020 and we were looking for a great 2020 where we were going to get out and we were going to do all these things and just do life differently from what we've done in the past 2 years. But then we got the new COVID, and then we had to step back, and then all the uncertainty of how we want to move forward. I'm sure that it's been stressful for everybody. And one of the things that I've been doing to support myself is I've increased my meditation using my spiritual practices. And I would like to support you in just knowing what practices work for you. Every day, I have motivational messages on Facebook and on Instagram. And on Facebook, I'm Reverend Grenetta Mason, and on Instagram, I'm Rev Grenetta. You can follow me and use those inspirational messages to support you. I know with me, I keep saying, oh, I have to watch my mental health, take care of myself because of all the uncertainty. So each week when I come, I have guests from all walks of life, and we talk about different practices. We talk about things that can support you. My guests, they can be artists, attorneys, doctors, just people doing life in many different ways. And I feel that everyone has something to share that can support us. Tonight, I have a very special guest and a very good friend that I've been friends with for over 40 years. My friend is Wendy Widner Peroni, and Wendy is a special needs educator and an advocate. Welcome, Wendy. How are you?
Hi.
How are you? I was like, you know how you always say the show must go on, right? So we're getting started a little late, but we are here. We are ready.
Good to see you.
So good to see you too. Wendy, I think it's I think it's really incredible that you've been, working with special needs students all of this time. So, talk to us about um, how did you choose to work with special needs students, and give us a little insight into how you got to where you are today in the field of supporting students with special needs.
Okay, here's the funny part. First of all, I'm retired, as you know, so I don't have many students that I support. They don't go away just because you retire. They still get older and need help and make a phone call or now a text. But this funny thing is, like, I don't know. I just always knew. I come from a family of teachers, and I knew I was going to be a special needs teacher.
Hmm.
I don't know why, because there was no special needs kind of like designation at the time. And the reason I went to Clark University, where I met you,
Mhm.
is back in 1973, they allowed me to be a self-designed major. So I
Okay.
could go there and write my own major, develop my own department, create my department around whatever professors I chose, and then I'd have to give a justification for them, and then I got it approved. And
Mhm.
it was great for me because, like I said, there was no special education major. There was no real special education courses per se. So
Mhm.
I did that at Clark, and
Mhm.
mine was called actually Special Education and the Expressive Arts. But reality
Mm.
wise, that doesn't make any money. So you can,
Mm.
it's like art therapy, and that
Mhm.
doesn't really, nobody pays for that now or then, even
Mhm.
back then.
Mhm.
So, my goal was always to teach. And from getting my bachelor's, I went to teaching in different variety of places, but I started as a DARE consultant. I don't know if you know what that is. They didn't get
Mm.
really great ratings as of recent. I
Mhm.
don't find that they were very effective in most of the research, but they're
Mhm.
called drug abuse resistance education. I
Mm.
used to be
Mhm.
their educational consultant twice a year and
Mhm.
train the police officers on how to work with students because they were first going into the schools. This was in, I'll tell you what year it was. It was 1988, and
Wow.
it was starting up. Yeah, and so they hired me twice a year. It was a great job. I only worked 2 days a whole year. It was fabulous. But that's not reality either. So, but I was training police officers, and that was kind of neat. And then I went to a school for Nazareth School for Boys, which is for kids that have been designated by the courts that they can
Mm.
live at home for a variety of reasons, whether it's the kid, with behavior disorder type of stuff,
Mhm.
or it could be the family is dysfunctional in some way.
Mhm.
So they get court ordered to this residential program. And I went from there, that's like elementary and middle school. So now I'm
Mhm.
starting to realize, what level do you want to teach? That's because that
Mhm.
makes a difference.
Right.
Middle school kids, I went to a middle school from that, court ordered thing. I went to a school for kids with disabilities in elementary. I went to a school, a middle school, inner city, and then I went to a suburban school. Uh, and I realized I didn't want to teach middle school.
But,
The kids were crazy, and
well,
they really were thinking like a lot of them because I had some behavior kids, a lot of behavior kids, and
mhm.
they were like waiting to turn 16. So I decided I
Mm.
wanted to go to the high school where the kids already made the commitment that they
Mhm.
want an education, no matter
Mhm.
how much they were going to struggle. And I wound up at a technical high school,
Mm.
which you always think is, oh, well, vocational. Now they call it technical. It's
Right.
vocational high school, and
Mhm.
they have many different careers or shops. And when I went to high school back in the 60s and 70s, they thought those were the kids that couldn't do. So they sent those to the vocation. You know what? Those
Right.
kids are so bright. They can handle two programs, a vocational program 1 week that they
Mhm.
have responsibilities to teachers and assignments. And then also
Mhm.
the academics are all squished in two
Mhm.
weeks into one. So it was kind of neat. And
All these kids were they had disabilities
such a
involved.
variety, such a
Well,
big variety. I went
right.
kids that were in wheelchairs with spina bifida, which is pretty significant,
Mhm.
physical disabilities as well as cognitive type impairments. Um, and then it goes to the kids that you would never recognize because he might be standing in an Apple store and he's the Apple genius helping you because he might have difficulty with learning, but he's
Mm.
got an ability, in this case, computers. Everybody has
Mhm.
an ability.
Mhm.
Everybody is worth something. Everybody
Mhm.
can do
Mhm.
something and offer something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah, because I think it's really interesting when you look at we generally we could say disabilities, but there's so many ranges to the different types of disabilities, and even when we talk about learning or speech disabilities or language, so there's just so many different variables, and being able to, I think it's like I mean I commend you because just working with kids in general, normal, so what we call quote normal kids, right, can
typical,
be
say
challenging.
typical, typical.
Typical,
That's
typical is
the
the word.
PC word, typical.
The typical kids can be challenging, and so imagine having to support kids with disabilities, right? And I know that you're retired now. Have you seen and COVID has just been like really
Oh my God.
um can you talk about the impact that you've seen that COVID has had on, like you say, your former students call you, or What kind of things, and even the teachers that you work with, what kind of sense are you getting from them around this whole COVID impact and these kids with special needs?
Well, I'll tell you what, special needs kids, typical kids or not, it doesn't really matter because kids are kids in the end. But special needs kids, of course, get a little bit more challenges because, let's put it this way, I had a student that I advocated for, and he was uh, nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
He had autism. So testing, this kid was young, and testing him, I don't totally trust because he was nonverbal. So I don't really trust these tests. So, but he nonetheless had many, many. Plus, he was legally blind. His remote teacher wanted him, and he was in kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted him to draw a butterfly. And the
Mm-hmm.
mom said, "I could draw you a butterfly. That's not a problem. But what's the point? He doesn't even know what a butterfly is." So
Mm-hmm.
this kid who needs one-on-one, well, now he's in a proper place. He's getting wonderful schooling, and he's wonderful. But those kind of kids, they can't. A lot of kids can't sit there. You got a kid with typical kid, but he's got ADHD, so he's kind of antsy, and he can't sit in front of this computer camera, in that
Mm-hmm.
chair like this. Wait to tell us, because they got you on mute. So even if he speaks out, they can't hear him. So you can't have. Let's go back to in school though. Right now they're
Mm-hmm.
in school.
Mm-hmm.
So in school, I was speaking to my cousin in New York, and
Mm-hmm.
she was saying, she teaches elementary, I think fourth grade, and she
Mm-hmm.
was saying our kids are in rows, straight rows. This
Mm-hmm.
We've never done that. Kids usually in reading groups. They're in small groups. That's how they support
Mm-hmm.
each other. You get
Mm-hmm.
peer support that way,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not allowed anymore. Um, all these one-on-one type, no, there's no more one-on-one, and there's no more small group. It's like we're going to just teach the group. And of course you have masks on. The teacher has a mask on. I understand that it has to be, but the kids are, they don't mind the mask. But what I'm saying is kids with disabilities, they might need to see your facial expression. A kid
Mm.
who's got Asperger's, high functioning autistic person, could be in a high level business, office building, having a wonderful job. But, as students, they still need, or even working in the environment, business environment, they still
Mm-hmm.
need to be able to see your face and their expression to try to understand what you're saying, because they don't get a lot of that social cue stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a hindrance. I have seen plastic masks. I saw this only in the very beginning. They were clear here,
Right, where you can see, right.
and they had
Mm-hmm.
fabric on them. But I did talk to people. They didn't last. I've never seen another one in the past year or more, because they got clouded up, they got dirty, and the breath, you really couldn't see it because it was plastic. So there you go. Kids who are deaf, they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
affected. Kids with speech impediments, they're going to be affected. Kids who can't
Mm-hmm.
understand. So we've seen
Mm-hmm.
a lot of uptake in, behavior problems. I mean, you read in the paper about guns.
Mm.
These kids are shooting in Boston. They're 15 years old, and you hear every day somebody's going down being shot. Not all of it is stray, but even if they are, either way,
Mm-hmm.
young people are with guns. There's behavioral issues. There's mental health issues. The doctors are flooded. Everything is a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
The kid needs a hug. There's no
Mm-hmm.
hugs right now.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, as you speak about that, what comes to mind, and you're talking about the kids being in rows in the school, right?
Mhm.
Um, it, the whole idea was that the kids needed to be back in the school, but then there's a whole shift in the way they are in the school. So are they really able to be with each other? So might as just keep them at home. Not might as well, but what's the impact of bringing them into the schools, right? When you still are going to allow them to function sort of as normal, as opposed to keeping them in the homes. And I do get that parents have to work. What are we going to do? There's just so many layers to kids going to school.
They
When they,
don't want to close the schools. Not one city, not one not one area that I have read about wants to close the schools, nor the teachers do they want to close the schools. Um, the problem is, though, that the kids bring these, whatever, they're little conduits for this. You know, they go back and forth to many different kids in the house, and maybe grandma, and you don't know who else, and you know, even the delivery, the father, you don't know what the mom does for a job, and it's very hard because if school closes, then parents, what do they do? I mean, this has really shocked the entire world, of course, not just education, but kids are a large part of this because if the kids aren't in the schools and the parents aren't able to go to work. And I had a friend, she actually a fellow school teacher and in my school, and she's her husband's bilingual, but he's not as strong in the English language. That's not his first language at all. And so he was trying to help, believe it or not, his kindergarten son last year, and it was so frustrating because they first of all the iPad that the school handed out. They didn't clear the screens. There was so many apps. Most parents have no clue what to do. In this case, he was somebody who was, trilingual and English was not first. So he was confused. The kid was confused. The kid was like, at some points, just shutting it down, saying, "I don't know which app I touch." I mean, these are kindergartens, they're little kids, and so many families, they don't have proper equipment. And then in the high schools, I hate to say it, we teaching alternative type students. There are a lot of kids that turn on Zoom without the camera because it must be broken. So Johnny went off to have a pizza somewhere, but his camera's on. He counted for attendance. So testing. I mean, the whole thing. Like if you're giving the test on a computer in the house. I mean, Johnny's brother or sister could be taking the test, or his cousin down the street. It could have paid someone. Who knows? This is a tough one. That's why they don't want to close the schools, because also the kids need each other. The kids need each other. They do badly.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying about them needing each other. It would be interesting to see what it looks like when they're with each other, if they have to sit straight behind, like the rows and the whole thing. So,
Dude,
you know,
recess, you have recess, and, even still you have interaction, the teachers at the front, I'm thinking the elementary schools or any schools, and the kids have a mask, but you can still have a debate. You can still do everything as long as you have your mask. Really, you can conduct school. The problem, what's happening though, is there are not enough teachers because they're getting sick. And the students, some of them are not coming to school by choice. Some are not coming because they're ill. Some are not coming because they might have to babysit because somebody else is in quarantine. So they have to do the chores for the home. There's a million different reasons.
There's a lot going on, right?
Well, and if there's not enough attendance, the school doesn't get enough from the state. I'm talking about public schools. They don't get enough, from what you do, they don't get enough money from the state then and the federal government, then you're kind of in a loss kind of situation. You know what I'm saying?
Right, because the funding is based on the students. Yeah, so you need to get the students into the schools in order to get the funding to run the schools. But if they're sick and the teachers are sick, what do? Right?
And the problem is no subs either.
Yeah, it's really, really a tough situation. And I wonder what, so many different suggestions on how it should be done. But everywhere we're seeing is everybody's like, keep them in school, keep them in school. So we'll have to go with that and see if the teachers last, are there, because today we were saying, how they were saying, there aren't enough teachers for all the students that are showing up, right? So what do you do with that? Yeah, this is a really tough one.
It's kind of similar to business, except it's worse because there's little faces in front of you that we can't leave, and say, your teacher's out today. Please, all of you open up page blah, blah, blah. We want you to do what you're supposed to know. You can't do that. This is kids. They need a leader in each and every group. In an office building, you can get away with it for a week maybe, but not in a day, not an hour in a school. It's a different whole environment.
Yeah, and also too, when we think of special needs kids, when they're in school, they get speech therapy, they get art, they get help throughout the day. And think of them having to just be in the home now with
And
a
do the
parent,
math.
right? Do you know of any resources that are available? It's so interesting to think about resources that are available. We need so many things for all the kids, but how do we support parents with special needs kids, you know?
Well, that's been a mess right now. To be honest with you, there isn't an
Mhm,
answer to that. I wish I could give you one.
mhm,
Because once these kids are at, well, first of all, because we're short of people.
mhm,
Typically, you're just short of funding. Now we're short of people and funding. Well,
mhm,
thing.
mhm,
And then on top of it, like you say, they're people are staying away. They don't want. There's just not group. There used to be like more groups with kids after school. There'd be like the Boys and Girls Club. There'd be, the YMCA. Even that, everything is limited. My grandson is 5 years old. They
mhm,
joined the Jewish Community Center, my son, for a basketball program they have there for him. And it was the first quote unquote game. It's skills, it's learning skills. And only one parent is allowed per family. So his mother had to stay home. My son got to go this week. She'll
mhm,
go next week. They'll take turns. That's how it has to be. Usually,
mhm,
family goes, she cheers you on. See, this is
mhm,
thing, self esteem. Kids aren't getting the support. So
mhm,
this is a support program, kids playing together. No, because then you only get so much support. They can play together, but again, they're not getting what you got as a kid. And I didn't play sports as a kid, but if I did, or music, I played in a band. My parents would
mhm.
come to see the concert. You know,
Right.
sing, or if you played
And
in
now it's limiting. You can only have so many people.
one person, one. And some
Mhm,
sports, they're just telling the players they can come and nobody else. And then that differs, town to town. And unfortunately, again, the people who have less, the poor people, the people with special needs, people with disabilities typically have less,
mhm,
just because they don't earn as much. Okay, so even my students who are graduated, they're in their 20s and 30s. I have one student, she's struggling now
mhm,
because she can't always go and teach preschool. It's not always available to her.
mhm,
And to move around in this pandemic when she has multiple disabilities, you know, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. You know,
mhm.
these are very trying times, and unfortunately, I don't have any answers. I wish I could say I do, but
Right.
I don't. And somebody needs to figure something out. But other than figuring out a solution to this pandemic, you
Mhm.
know, to the next variation, but to keep the kids in school is most important.
Yeah, I hope that that continues to be the thing, and I guess I look at it as time pass, will this variant pass, and then we move into getting that back together? But who knows? That's the uncertainty part. That's the part that's just like, who would have
Yeah,
thought that here we are now still dealing with COVID in the way that we are dealing with it? Because we last year we all got vaccinated and we were like on a roll. We thought everything was gonna be great.
summer, summertime, you're outside.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here, because I can be outside. It scares me. People say, "Oh, Florida's worse." Oh, well, it is, but it's outside, so I don't have to be in a crowd. I don't have to be inside anywhere. I ate
Mhm.
outside tonight,
Mhm.
totally outside. Yeah,
Mhm.
nobody near me.
Right. So you're able to um be alone and outside. And I think they say Florida in the sense that if you still are going to have big gatherings and go to these
Oh,
places
sure.
and are not masked, then I think that's when it becomes more of a problem. Because I've been to Florida throughout with you this whole thing, and we just kept our mask on within the crowds, did the right thing, even when during the time when they said it was the worst. And you do see people in Florida without masks, but I've seen people all over without masks on, right? In
Massachusetts, I did. Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting, state by state, because um out when you were talking about the little like your grandson being in school, being able to play sports, how much of that is really going on in
Most schools.
they're
Is that
playing
what you're
sports? Yeah, are
Yeah.
they?
Well, first of
No.
all, he's too young to play in school because he's only kindergarten. So
Oh,
this is a
okay.
little, outside at the Y, they pay a week. All little kids do it. A little skills training. Um,
Okay.
but what I was going to say is, I know in my high school normally there was four. This is why I taught it. There was four in the physical education department. When
Mhm.
COVID came, they tried to do some of it remote. And quite personally, I mean, I hope no one's listening that would get mad at this, but I think they should have kept those teachers on because this is the time you need somebody to talk about health and to say, hey, come on, guys, let's get up. I'll put some music on, and we're gonna exercise now.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because these kids are sitting on the couches with their whatever those are called
Devices. Mhm.
devices.
Right. Right.
They're not getting exercise and they're not eating healthy because a bag of chips is easier to grab than cutting an orange. So,
Mhm.
you need to talk to them, even if they're not going to listen. Maybe somebody will get it. If you grab two, three kids, it's still worth it. And then you can get them. Kids
Mhm.
like to dance, they like to move. You could invent things. I mean, I'm not a
Mhm.
phys ed teacher, but I could still invent stuff. And
Mhm.
kids with special needs, they're the ones, of course, that need adaptive PA sometimes, adaptive PE, I mean, physical education. But they still need it at home if the itinerant can't come. Their disability might not. Sometimes the weather, you guys, in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, the way things are, if the kid's not in the school, it's harder to get to their families, to get into the house. Um, some families don't want you in their house.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's a variety. This has impacted so much. We don't really know, but we know that children are suffering from all these restrictions due to the pandemic.
Mhm.
It just
Mhm.
needs more study.
Hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, it is interesting, and as you said, it's about all children, but in particular, children with special needs are probably hit even harder,
Or much harder.
throughout this whole thing. Let's shift a bit and talk about your spiritual journey.
Okay.
And I know you yeah, you could tell us your spiritual journey because I kind of know part of it. Go ahead.
Well,
You
mm,
grew up right now.
I, I grew up a nice Jewish girl
A nice Jewish girl from
on
Long
the right
Island.
side of the tracks in Elmont, New York, near the Belmont racetrack. I can see the grandstands from my window when the leaves are down.
Mhm.
Yes. And I did go to a not religious school. I went to a school to learn about Jewish culture for me.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I went, first was called Shula, which just means school in Yiddish. Most
Mhm.
kids go to Hebrew school.
Mhm.
My mom spoke, my mom, she
Mhm.
spoke Yiddish, and they weren't religious so much as they were, speaking about God and afterward as they were about family and culture and traditions.
Mhm.
And that's what my mom liked. And so they sent me to this school, and then they sent me to what was called the Middle Shoah. Well, that was really fun because that was located right on the boundary of Greenwich Village in Union Square. Union Square in 14th Street, Union Square is where it was.
Mhm.
And it was run by really cool old men. They were like 80 something years old. And they taught us about how Jewish people fit into the culture of America and what they
Mhm.
contributed
Mhm.
to America as a nation becoming, who we are now.
Mhm.
And they were interesting too because when it was the Vietnam Memorial March on Washington, They
Mm-hmm.
closed the school because the professors, 80 something years old, they went to march on Washington. They were very
Mm,
progressive. So,
mm,
yeah, it was very interesting. And I learned a lot about my background, my culture. I'm not typically like most Jewish Long Island girls were bat mitzvahed. I wasn't done that. I went to
oh,
the,
you didn't do all that. Okay.
no, 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 no. I didn't do any of that stuff. And I'm very proud of who I am. And I married a person who is Italian from
Mm.
Clark, as
Chris.
you know, Bob. And it's interesting because we neither one said you need to convert. We both just figured I don't know how people do convert anyway. I think if you've grown up your whole life believing one thing, how do you suddenly go, well, I'm married to this guy, I think I'll change it over now.
I'm thinking of it now, right?
I met a person a month ago when I came to you.
Mm-hmm.
I left you and I went the next day to Westchester County and I met a girl and very, very nice. And I don't know, she looked extremely, like just Irish Catholic, but she's now the president of her temple. She converted. She's more Jewish involved than my girlfriend is. It's just like, but everybody has their own thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do mine and I have my menorah and my little holidays that my children really enjoy. I know they do. But they're not children anymore; they're grown men.
Mm-hmm.
But they enjoy it, and Bob, we do a lot of Italian traditions, and
So it's like Italian traditions, like the Christian traditions, or what are Italian traditions,
well,
like eating?
yeah, I
So
think
what
it
do
was
you say?
more
Right.
cultural than like actual, Christianity. You know what? That's what I'm saying. I embrace that piece of it. To me, that was understandable. I could
Mm-hmm.
understand it. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Coming from a
Yeah.
Jewish background, it was just easier to understand it culturally for me.
Mhm. What about the kids? So, what would you say? Do you feel that they have a balance in both, or are they more Christian? What would you say? Be and I guess it would be in practices, I guess, and culturally, it's there. Anything that you could say they're one more than the other, or they embrace both?
Well, I think they embrace both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Religiously, as far as going to, it's kind of interesting because my son, my older one, Jeffrey, does go to church because his fiance and the kids go, and
Oh, okay.
so
So they're Christian.
he's Christian, and they're raising my grandson Vincent Lorenzo and soon to be Daniel Allen
Oh, damn.
Christian. In fact, they go to Venerini Academy. It's in
Mm.
order, and again, in order to keep the kids in school, they made a choice to pull them out of
Mhm,
public schools, and I'm a public school proponent, obviously.
mhm,
But when they made that choice and a choice to put them in a Christian school, I embraced it totally because number one, they stayed in school the whole pandemic. They're so careful. So my grandson will go to school every single day. Number
mm,
two, he goes to church. So when he goes to church, that is then supported in the school. And
mhm,
it's values. It's a matter of morals and values. They're not teaching him anything that's like, oh my God, that's Christian. He can't learn this. You know,
mhm,
it's
mhm,
all good being a good person. Every religion should point to that. That's my spirituality. Mine is to treat everybody. I guess that's what I'm gonna tell you. Is that
mhm,
mine is because I get nervous. It's oh my God, I have to really be think of it in terms of Christianity or something more formal. But no, my spirituality, I think you'd agree with this, is to be kind to people, everybody, the exact same way you would the queen or the
mhm,
janitor or the guy
mhm,
sitting on the curb. You
mhm,
know, treat people the right way, especially at
mhm,
these times.
mhm,
The times when people need you to say, I like that blouse you're wearing. It looks nice with your hair, or
mhm,
anything just
mhm,
to
mhm,
get a smile. That's what I like to do.
mhm,
It brings me joy.
mhm.
I don't know.
So do you see yourself incorporating any of the Jewish practices and Jewish principles with your grandkids, or would you think that how it seems like it's dominant Christianity because they go to church,
Oh,
they go to
sure.
the Christian school and all that.
Oh,
How
for
do you
sure.
think?
I introduced them to my holidays, and again the foods, some of the foods and the traditions of my holidays. Well, Hanukkah is a pretty obvious one with the lighting of the
Mhm.
candles, but also like for me, Hanukkah is a very small. It is to the Jewish people. It's a very minor holiday. It's not Christmas. It's not supposed to be like Christmas. It's not the same story, in that sense. And I like keeping it like, hey, these I give. It's a kind of a joke. Boots and books for Hanukkah.
Mhm.
So how do I pass on some of my Jewish traditions, faith,
Mhm.
culture? Well, um, my family was, like I said, all teachers.
Mhm.
My mother was a preschool teacher and was fortunate enough to know my grandsons. And she also was a book collector of children's books. She loved children's literature.
Mhm.
So I love to share that with them. And special books,
Mhm.
books that teach
Mhm.
um, about patience. In fact, I just bought one. It's called The Very Impatient Caterpillar. You being a new grandmother, I'm
Mhm.
going to have to share some books with you too.
Right. Mhm.
Because there's certain classics, and The Giving Tree is one of them. It's the
Mhm.
simplest book. It has just a few words on each thing, on each page, but it tells a very important story.
Mhm.
And if you haven't read The Giving Tree, I suggest you all read it because
Mhm.
it take you less than 5 minutes, literally, to read the whole
Mhm.
book.
Mhm.
And the message is important,
Mhm.
especially again now. The
Mhm.
simple things. Remember the simple
Mhm.
things.
It's interesting because you can, through the books and the reading, share those traditions with them,
Love
right?
of education,
Right,
education.
right, exactly. And I think that'll be really good too because it'll, as they grow older and start to explore, they'll still have some of their Jewish roots and understand a part of what that meant,
Grandmother
Uh,
was because I am out of their whole environment. I am the only quote unquote pure Jew.
Yeah, and you're in Worcester, Massachusetts, right?
I'm not a hybrid, I'm a purebred.
Yep, you're right. So, is there a Jewish community though in Worcester?
There is. There is, I guess. I don't know. The world is different now. To be really uh, to be belonging to some group, it's for me it's difficult because I found that some of them were too. There was one that contacted me when my mom was living in a facility, and she wanted
Mhm.
me to join this Jewish group, but it was really ultra orthodox,
Mm.
and a lot of it in the end became how much you're going to donate. So
Mm.
it's not working like going to a shelter, working with children, going into an orphanage. It's not really an orphanage, but a foster home,
Mhm.
that they might
Mhm.
have. There's many ways to do things for me without necessarily having to go to a building. I like to
Mhm.
do it every day. I like to
Mhm.
make people around me feel comfortable every day. And I think that, I don't know if that's part of being a Jew, because if you look at people like Joan Rivers, a lot of comedians are Jewish. They like people, make people laugh. Italians are also fun like that. They like to make people laugh.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's so funny that you said that because I was thinking about laughter today, and I
important.
was thinking about how important it is to laugh and just
Smile.
crack up until you cry, belly laughs, right?
Yeah.
Now, how many people really allow themselves to really laugh, right?
How many have the opportunity, though?
Yeah. And what does it take? Because I feel like I can laugh all the time and make funny jokes out of everything, right? And I think it's more a perspective. And I get that, if life isn't going the way, I mean, people are in so many situations. If only they could just laugh really hard and then just get the energy of what that laughter will bring, right?
Mhm.
And it leads me to talking about, I talk about the spiritual toolkit and spiritual practices. What practices support us? And laughter is one of those things that supports me so much all the time. I was just
You
on the phone with Donna before I spoke to you, and I had to tell her stop, right?
I know those times
Right,
when the hand goes.
right. You know those times where we just go down that road where we're just like laughing, and I was like, "Oh, please stop! I don't want to like cry up all of my makeup. I don't want to do but
Waterproof.
waterproof. But now afterwards, that was what I thought about as one of those practices that could just be so great. And I also think about, when I say what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And my goal is to support people and finding joy and living your best life, right? And I do that and I say it doesn't have to be the struggle, right? It doesn't have to be hard, right?
No.
So if you find yourself in the struggle, then what can you do to come out of that, right? What kind of things can you do to find that space of grace and ease, no matter what life is going on around you, having those moments where you can really like even just laugh, or what practices can you use to support you? And so that's what keeps me talking about spiritual practices, talking about the spiritual toolkit, because I totally believe that you can live your best life, enjoy, no matter what's going on around you. So I love to support people
100%.
in get into that space where you can find that piece of joy. What about you, Wendy? What would you say are your top three spiritual practices that support you?
Okay, well, like you, I love to laugh. So I try to find things. But I try to find, and this is going to sound really corny, but
Mhm,
you know me well enough to know that I do this too. My husband knows. I like to see beauty in things. I like to walk out the door. Okay, I had somebody pass away the other day.
mhm,
Very important person to me. I
mhm,
hit the beach. They passed away when I was at the airport coming down here.
mhm,
And a few hours later, I went to the beach. I sat down in my chair.
mhm,
I looked up at the sky because I like to do that. And this
mhm,
is not going to sound maybe right to you, but to me it was very important. There was a huge heart, and it was made out of a black cloud. How interesting. At the very top corner on the right, there was this brilliant light of the
mhm,
sun coming out. When I tell you this was a perfect heart, I sent it to my cousin whose mom had passed and blah, blah, blah.
mhm, mhm,
So I enjoy the laughter. I enjoy seeing beauty. And then, like I said before, I like to share happiness. So if I
mhm,
go to CVS and you're my cash register girl, I'm
mhm,
going to say, you have a beautiful smile, or
mhm,
something nice to this girl to
mhm,
make her smile. I like to share smiles. I guess
mhm,
that's what I do. I share
mhm,
smiles, I share laughter, and I find the beauty in my own eyes. And I like to
mhm,
say, look at it. Some people don't listen to me, but I
mhm.
look at it. So,
You like to share that with people,
oh
right?
yeah, happy things. Yep, yep, and support them. Very important to support anybody, especially young people that are trying to survive in this world, whether it's been business, whether it's educationally. My students still call me. My oldest student that talks to me is 56 years old. I met
Wow.
her when she was 14 in middle school.
Wow.
And
I was gonna ask you to what talk about, I know you said you're retired, right? So currently how are you doing your advocacy and supporting your students?
well, no, advocacy is something when I do advocate work, I am a certified transition specialist. So first of all, I can help kids transition from high school to the world beyond, which is quite
Oh, okay.
difficult for many of our students. And yeah, I do have that certification. You don't need any special certification to be an advocate, to be quite honest with you, at all. I mean, I have a
Wait, well, okay, but let me stop one moment. When you say you specifically said a transition specialist, right? So this means students with special needs going from middle school to high school or high school. What is that? Talk
well,
about what
actually,
that means.
transition is something that's new in the past. Now it's almost, now I'm really starting to realize how old I am. But yeah, it's kind of scary. It's like, oh shoot, I've been out 6 years. That means if I did that 2 years, I did 8 years. Wow, in the past 10 years, I might have been one of like the beginning, group, but now it's like 10 years. Yeah, it's really different.
It
But
might be called something different now, 10 years later, but no, go ahead.
no, it's actually what I was saying in the sense that transition was never talked about. So all we did was we wrote these IEPs, we work with these children, we
Mhm.
send them grade to grade to grade, then they graduate. Yeah, see you later. Then what do? So
Mm.
transition isn't important for the average kid who goes and gets a driver's license, works at Stop and Shop or CVS. That's not the kid who needs transition. The kid who needs transition might be, well, might be a student that won't have a job, might be a student that was like mine, that was asked to draw a butterfly, that has no communication skills, might be blind, but he might just enjoy listening to the symphony. So he can go to the university, and people saying, oh, what's the big deal? Because he's still a human being who deserves to enjoy life and have some value to his life, have a purpose to his life. And if it means just getting up and his mom being able to take him in his wheelchair to the university, it's teaching those university kids things too. It's teaching them tolerance. We always hid these disabilities kids in another classroom. You couldn't see them in another building. And we're trying to bring people out into the world and say, excuse me, we have value too, and there's something we can do as well. So I forgot where I was going on that one, but
So you were talking about that's how you transition them into,
oh,
I
into
guess, like
the world after.
right, the world after school rather than because I know I work at a educational institution
Right.
and we give high school equivalencies. But we do have a lot of students who come in with their IEP. They can't do anything with it. People at colleges aren't accepting it. So then they want to come in and be able to get a high school equivalency so they can go on to continue their lives, right? So I've seen a lot of students with the IEP get stopped, get to a certain point, and there's nothing left for them. Even if they wanted to go to college, colleges are not
Don't want them.
accepting.
There is a college though that one of the reasons I went to be a transition specialist, I went to take this whole program, which was a year, and it cost me out of pocket $8,000, and my school I think chipped in $4,000, and that was 8 years ago, so it costs maybe more now. It was at Leslie University. I had a student that had multiple disabilities. Wonderful girl, wonderful girl. And she was applying to many colleges, and she was applying as learning disabled. And I kept explaining to her parents that don't pay the $75, $100 application fee. You're wasting your money. This is not where she's going to be successful. She cannot do the academic work to the level of a college student. She's not gonna be able to do it. But you know what she could do? She went to a school, and it's called oh my God, now I forgot the name. I'll come up with the name. It's at Leslie. And the program that I went to become a transition specialist, she went to this college. It's for kids with intellectual disabilities. It's at Leslie University in Boston. They get to use all of the facilities for Leslie. They can go to, the gym, maybe the cafeteria, the library, whatever. But their classes are different. So, and they live there. They have dorms. So they learn independence. They have the college life. But what are their courses? Their courses are some cooking, What if there's a
Mm,
fire? How to work a fire extinguisher, how to call
mm,
911. And what
mhm,
do they wind up getting? Is they, so what? They can live on their own? No. They have a choice of two different degrees, I believe. One was in early childhood education. She got
mhm,
an early childhood education certificate. So she can be, now she knows she's not going to be the lead teacher because that right now at the age of 24 is not what she's capable of doing. Will
mhm.
she be able to do it later? If she chooses to, she's now got the certificate. She also can get hired in programs because some of them have used illegally, actually, her license.
Mm.
It's not really a certificate, it's a license. And they've used her license in order to employ somebody without it. But she had it. Her parents paid the money for the program.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you what, at first, she didn't want to go, and the parents didn't want to even address it. And I just kept letting it lay low. And then I went back. And long story short, she went, she came out, and she teaches, I think it's at a Head Start now. But she's
Wow, that's great.
that, oh, not a head teacher. Like I said, she's assistant, and sometimes they don't always treat her well. I have to say
Mhm,
that too. She gets
mhm,
bullied, but um, she at least has a way to get a job. She has a resume, and
mhm,
that was important to me, you know.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
she,
so and that I think that is important, the support, and even knowing. I think I recently met a lawyer that works with people who have IEPs
oh
and
yeah,
with right. And the thing that was interesting for me is that for me, it's more about education, letting the parents know what's available to them, like letting everybody know what services are available, what are the rights of the students, and all the things with students with disabilities, and understanding the rights of your child, where to get the support that you need, how to even advocate for your child as a parent, right? I thought that all of that is important. So it's really being able to educate the parents, being able to give them a place where they have resources also, because it's a hard job for them to do it. So then, what support do we give to the parents? Along with supporting the students in many ways. I know there are many things to support the students, but also in supporting the parents. So
well, there
I
are many
really.
groups. There are, they Google in the area, there are
Mhm,
special needs parent groups that will
mhm,
support each other. And you would go pretty much by the level or by the disability, depending upon what you're looking for, the
mhm,
severity of your own student's disability. But there is also the state. In I'm not sure what you guys call it in New York, but in Massachusetts, it's called, the acronym would be DESE,
mhm,
Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or capital
mhm,
letters DESE. It's out of
mhm.
Boston, and you could call and you can put in a grievance. I have helped people to file a grievance if they felt that the teacher or the program or the IEP or the school system, depending on what it um, was not being compliant with what their child needs were. You can file a grievance. I mean, again, though, this is the reality of the pandemic. My husband's an attorney. Right now, if you go to court and say I need a new date, well, they're going to give you a date in May. So by
Mm,
then, your student's out of school. You missed the whole year.
mm,
I've seen this happen since the beginning of the remote.
mhm,
When it started way back when, where the parent kept calling in. Kid was in middle school, eighth grade, and he suddenly was failing. Well, he was failing because he was on remote. Well, there's another
mm,
program. So how did she get him? Let's get this kid in there 3 times a week or 4 times a week instead of once a week, which was the
mm.
typical kid's choice. The other kids with needs was staying every day. I said, why isn't your kid there every day? This makes no sense. So, of course, conversation, the kid wound
Mhm.
up going every day and actually being happy because
That's
he was able to learn,
mhm.
you know.
That's cool when you can see it works for some, but how many get that
Well,
opportunity?
because they don't know and nobody's there to tell them.
Tell
This
them
that
right.
particular case, it was my hairdresser, and
Mm,
she was concerned about her child. She was telling me the story, and that's why I said, let's talk about this. You
yeah.
know, so
But well, I think that what you do, and even after, even though you're retired, and what you've done is so great. And I really appreciate people who, really work with special needs students and people with disabilities. So I salute you for what you do. And thank you for joining me here tonight on Conversations with
Yeah.
Reverend G. It's been great having you share what you do and talk about, how we can really support people with disabilities. And as we talk about, because of the pandemic, it's really like, how do we support people? And then to really think about people with special needs is just a whole nother layer that goes on top of that.
Trying to get
So
a wheelchair fixed, or to get the wheelchair, and you have, sorry, well, because of the pandemic, we can't, there's nobody here to answer the phone, but I need to get out of the house.
yeah, it's so much, so much. So yeah, I just, pray that everybody gets the support that they need right now, and that we continue to shift through this pandemic and get to a new space where, we're comfortable again. So thank you, Miss Wendy, and I will totally be in touch.
Love you.
Love you
Bye.
too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. I'm here every Monday night from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. WEMS Radio Live. You can find us on Mondays on Facebook, on YouTube, and on the WEMS Radio app. You can also find me every day on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason with inspirational quotes to support you through your day. Check me out on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Reverend Grenetta Mason. One thing I'd like to leave you with today is, how often are you laughing? Laughter can really bring some great joy and great feelings. I hope you get to laugh. I'll see you next week right here on WEMS Radio Live.